Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J Reels Podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. There may not be a lot of action in the sports universe, but whatever's out there, you know I got you covered, as I'll get into all of the latest as this is the J Reels Podcast with your host, J Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And as we get through the dog days, as we're now just 3 weeks, think about this, 3 weeks from the opening of the NFL season, and then even on top of that, to add another layer, do you know that the college football season starts next Saturday? Now, granted, it's a very light schedule, and to me, college football will start on the 31st, so at the final day or on the final day of the month, that's when we can really rejoice for the college football fan, and then right after that will be the NFL. But between now and then, and yes, I know a little US Open will kick us off there a week from this coming Monday. Right now, baseball is going to be the hot topic as we get through the remainder of this month. And for starters, and shockingly, I have to raise my hand high in the air, and I know I talked about this even as early as 3 weeks ago, and I have to eat some big giant crow here, but for the hottest team in baseball as of right this second, and no, it's not the Yankees, no, it's not the Dodgers, and yes, we can even talk about the Diamondbacks and Padres, who I think they're going to run the table and maybe face off in the wild card round when it's all said and done. But the Houston Astros, remember that team that started off 12-24, a team that looked like they were in disarray under new manager Joe Espada, to where they had to deal with the likes of cutting Jose Abreu, which I thought was an excellent signing 2 years prior or 2 off seasons ago, where they had to let him go with his Mendoza-like batting average and lack of production at first base. Then we could talk about Justin Verlander, who is on the mend, but has not toed the rubber in almost 2 months because of a neck issue. And with two of their big-time starters, whether your name is Christian Javier or even Jose Urquidy, both on the shelf because of Tommy John surgery, and bringing in Josh Hader, a big-time closer, to have that back of the bullpen with he and Ryan Presley, where Hader started off with an ERA about 9 in the first month and change of the season. I thought that this team was going to be out to sea by now. And yes, we could talk about all of the success that they've had here over the last 6-7 years, and the ALCS appearances, 7 in a row, and the World Series appearances, 4, and 2 titles to boot, that one of these years you knew was going to go south. And I thought with all that I discussed, that this wasn't going to click. There wasn't going to be a time where this team was going to get themselves in a groove, mind you, in a very weak AL West. But here they are. The Astros are pretty much the Freddy Krueger of baseball, where you have to cut off the head and certainly try to get out of that nightmare on Minute Maid Park Street, or whatever that street the ballpark resides on. And here they are in first place, winners of 8 straight. And out of those 8 games that they've won, all of them have been on the road, because they started this road trip last week to where they had run the table ever since they had started the streak, where it was in, well, that wasn't in Boston, because they're going to play Boston and then Tampa. But this road trip, which started, I'm not going to say precariously, but from that time on, where they did sweep the Red Sox, and then right now just polished off the Rays, and we could probably pretty much say goodbye to the Rays as far as the wild card scenario is concerned, but we'll talk about them in a bit. But after losing that first game to the Rangers down in Arlington, and then winning those back 2 games, and talk about another team that's going to be out to sea or put out the pasture, and we'll get to them later on. But since then, they haven't lost a game. They won those back 2 games in Texas before going to Fenway, sweeping the Red Sox, and then now swept the Rays, to where they come home and have to face the White Sox, who actually had a pretty good series against the Yanks. Although they did lose 2 out of 3, but considering they hung in there and blew out the Yankees in the first game. But we would think the White Sox, now that they got it out of their system, I'm sure they're going to go to Minute Maid and be sacrificial lambs to the Astros. But it's all about what they've done here after that terrible start to turn their season around to where they're currently 2.5 games and 3 in the loss ahead of the Mariners. And talk about the Mariners. They sweep the Mets, my pathetic New York ball club that I root for. And then what happens? They go on the road, and all they do is they get spanked to the tune of them getting swept, and of all teams, by the Tigers. Now, they do have a game to play this afternoon, so there hasn't been a full sweep as of yet because they started their series on Tuesday. But the Mariners can't get out of their own way to the point where here they are trying to be neck and neck and nose to nose with the Astros in the AL West, and now they're 3 in a loss and 2.5 back. And before you know it, with the White Sox coming in, and then Seattle goes to Pittsburgh, another dead team walking, which we'll get to. But who knows? This trip here to the Midwest and even to the Eastern Seaboard, or close to the Eastern Seaboard, who knows where the Mariners will be after this weekend, considering the Pirates have now lost 10 in a row, and they have a day off today before they regroup to play Seattle tomorrow. So who knows what this Mariner team is going to show up, or which one is going to show up by the time we get to Monday, where who knows, the Astros may be in a good stead in the AL West to where they may cruise to a division title. And obviously you weren't going to say that as early as I would even think, maybe even a month ago, right around the time of the All-Star break. So the Astros, I got to give them the utmost credit. They've turned their season around. And also, here's another guy I didn't throw into the mix, Kyle Tucker, who is also maybe close to returning. But after fouling a ball off in the month of June, he hasn't seen the field since then. And without Tucker and all of their pitching staff in shambles, but they've turned it around to the point where once they get Tucker back and maybe even Verlander back to go along with the rotation, that's not really sexy. Yes, I get he got Framber Valdez at the top. And when you look at a guy like Ronel Blanco, who's had his moments this year, threw a no-hitter on April Fool's Day and came close to throwing another one where he threw 7 no-hit innings there right before the All-Star break. But when you have guys like Hunter Brown, who, yes, it is a good, solid prospect, but Spencer Arangetti and even Yusei Kikuchi, who they got from Toronto, yes, this may not be a pitching staff that's going to shake in your boots, but they know how to pitch, and more importantly, they know how to win. Now, let's see what's going to happen come October when you have guys like Hunter Brown and even, let's see, Ronel Blanco step up in pressure situations in big-time games. But if Verlander is going to be there to go along with Framber Valdez and his craftiness as a lefty, the lineup, if you're still going to have Jose Altuve, we understand big game player, Alex Bregman, who has really been hot as of late, Yordan Alvarez, you look up, he's put up big numbers and he's batting 300 or even over 300 for that matter. And if you're going to put Tucker back in the mix and Jeremy Pena, who's hit well as of late, the Astros are still dangerous. They're still a team to be reckoned with. And yes, they're going to end up, in all likelihood, with the 3 seed in the AL West, or in the American League, I should say, because the Yankees and or Orioles and then the Guardians, who have the best record in the American League, those are going to be 2 of the 3 teams that will have the bye going into the wild card round before they start their division series. So Houston, they have a lot of ground to make up if they're even thinking about contending for at least the 2 seed and maybe even the 1-2, because Cleveland, Baltimore, and the Yankees are all separated by about a game. But here they are. Astros right now are, I'm not going to say in cruise control as of yet, but certainly have put themselves in the mix here as a team that could possibly go deep into October. And that's even the bigger question, because the Astros, they aren't here just to win a division and then bow out in the wild card round. We've seen them go to 7 straight American League Championship Series. Do they have it in them to get that deep, to go that far? I think if they are a wild card team and having that first week to where they'll host a wild card round, and whomever it is that they play, let's say if they win that series, they'll have some juice going into that next series, which in all likelihood could be whomever that top seed is. Because remember, they don't reseed once you get past the wild card round. So I think the Astros have as good as a shot to get back to another championship series based on them being a wild card team. Now, if they were a 2 seed, or dare I even say a 1 seed, that could be a little bit dicey. Yes, they could rest. Yes, they could set up their rotation. But because of them being a little bit older, and yes, they have a lot of mileage, despite the fact that they do have that championship DNA, as I like to say. But I think they have a better path to get to a championship series if they're a wild card team than they are if they were to be a top 2 seed. Because I would think that as much as they would need the blow as being an older team, but I don't know. I can't trust the Astros 100% despite the fact of all their success here over the last 7 years. And that's kind of strange to say and weird, and I get it. But remember, as much as they've had this big run where they've won the 2 World Series, 4 World Series appearances, everything I detailed a little while ago, they do have scar tissue. For some reason, they can't win games at home, as evidence is last year when they lost to the Texas Rangers after winning the middle 3 games of that ALCS in Arlington. They lost the back 2 games in their building and then bowing out, not reaching a World Series to defend their title. And that also happened in the World Series, as we know, in 2019, in that crazy scenario with the Washington Nationals, where they lost the first 2 games at home, 1-3 in Washington before coming back on to lose the final 2. And then even in the Braves series, where they lost a Game 6, mind you, they were down 3-1 in that series after splitting the first 2 at Minute Maid, but they came home to a Brave team that was rolling, that was hot, although the Astros did win a Game 5, but they ended up losing a Game 6, and the Braves were able to celebrate on that turf. So as much as I could say, yes, they do have the experience, they do have the know-how, they do have the mettle, but there's also that other switch which, when you feel that you can trust them, then they betray you. So who knows what's going to happen come October? We understand it's all a crapshoot, but do they have a deep run in them? I think it's a little bit too early to tell, and yes, we could all try to base it on experience and everything I just mentioned, but the Astro team right now, they're dangerous, and I wouldn't put it past them to not get back to another ALCS, but let me see a month from now where we are with this team and how close they are to the top of the American League, and I'll get a better sense. Right now, you can't argue that they are hot, and they are a team that certainly still has to be reckoned with, considering everything that has transpired here, not only just this year, but just overall with this Astro team. Because like I said, you're going to have to put the stake through the heart and chop their head off in order to put them in the rearview mirror. So kudos to them and what they've done, and even Joe Espada keeping the team afloat throughout all this after the rough start, and maybe could be a manager of the year candidate in the American League, quite possibly, although I think Stephen Vogt of the Guardians would get that. But here they are, alive, kicking, and who knows if they're going to go out scratching, clawing, and screaming on their way to another championship series and maybe even quite possibly a World Series appearance. So that's the first thing. The second thing on the docket that I have to bring up is Aaron Judge and the AL MVP race. Now, I get it. Nobody really cares about the AL MVP when it's all said and done. And you can look to the guy who's batting in front of him as also a potential MVP candidate. But after him hitting his 300th home run last night, and it was interesting how that series unfolded. The Yankees go to Chicago, South Side, Monday night, and they get their doors blown off, 12-2, the most runs that the White Sox have scored all year. And it made you think, all right, can the Yankees get another game here? And even with the 3 home runs by Juan Soto on Tuesday to win 4-1, and then yesterday they're down 2-1 in the 6th inning, and you think to yourself, oh, geez, can the Yankees even think to lose a series to the lowly White Sox? Which, not to say it would be rock bottom, but for the recent success that the Yankees coming out of that terrible stretch from the middle of June to the end of July, pretty much from the Red Sox series when they won 2 out of 3 at Fenway and then they swept the Phillies there at the end of July, they came out of that stretch to where, all right, they're playing a soft underbelly of the schedule, and even though they lost 2 out of 3 to the Angels, but they righted the ship, let's see what they could do here. And after losing that first game and Soto getting the 3 home runs and even starting off last night's game with a home run, but they're down 2-1 in the 6th inning, and then they just piled it on to the point where they had 3 runs in the 6th and then 6 runs in the 7th to win 10-2, including a 3-run homer from Aaron Judge. So they were able to get out of Chicago, winning 2 out of 3 before facing the Tigers starting tomorrow in Detroit. But for Aaron Judge, 300th home run, we know the numbers this year. He has 44 home runs, well over 100 RBIs. His OPS is almost 1,200. And I thought, to me, it's no contest. He's going to be your MVP, bar none. And yes, there are some other worthy candidates. Yes, you could talk about his teammate there in right field, but I think Soto, as much as he's been a huge addition to this Yankee lineup and to the team overall, and how they're the true-headed monster of that lineup, but to me, we all know the guy that stirs the drink, the one who's the straw, is number 99. And he's going to continue to put up prodigious numbers. He could flirt with 60. And even if he doesn't get to 60, he's going to end up somewhere in the vicinity between 55, 60 home runs, 120 some odd RBIs. He's batting close to 330, I believe. And his OPS is through the roof. So with all those numbers that he's been able to compile this year, to me, he is already, on August 15th, write it down, the MVP of the American League. And yes, there are some worthy candidates, whether your name is Jose Ramirez of the Guardians or Gunnar Henderson of the Orioles or even Bobby Witt Jr. of the Royals. And yes, they certainly need to be considered. But as we all know, when we get to the end of the season, they're going to figure out who the top three guys are. And you could even argue 2 of the 3 guys play on the same team. And maybe in years past, one guy cancels out the other, and it's a situation where, which one of those 2 is going to get the MVP? And even though Soto is worthy, as well as the aforementioned Henderson and Witt, as well as Ramirez, but how could you not select, whether you're a fan, media, even player, to think that it is Aaron Judge's MVP to lose? That's all there is to it. So let's see where his numbers will fall at the end of the year. And overall, he's the best player in the sport. I don't want to hear about Ohtani. Yes, he's a DH. We understand when he pitches, and he's starting to even lightly toss or get himself on the mound to not pitch this year, but part of his rehab to get himself primed and ready for next year to be a starting pitcher for the Dodgers. But as big as a year that Ohtani has had, his first year in Hollywood, and chances are he may win the MVP and is the front runner to win the NL MVP, which would be 3 and 4 years for him and in 2 different leagues. Yes, I get it, but Judge overall, right now, if you ask me, is the best player in the sport. And that is not going out on a limb by any stretch. So that's what we have there with Judge, and have to give him his props. And speaking of LA, the Dodgers, that is, they get back Mookie Betts, who, after almost 2 months on the shelf with that broken hand that he suffered being hit by a pitch in the middle part of June, what does he do for an encore? He hits a home run. And the Dodgers get back on the beam to the point where they won the first 2 games in Milwaukee. They did lose last night, and that was with Walker Buehler after being out since June with hip inflammation. And Buehler trying to find his way. He's going to be an important cog here of this Dodger wheel to see if they could get themselves some separation in that NL West. And not only that, with even much more bigger aspirations than that as far as getting to a World Series and winning it. So let's see if Buehler can ramp up here his final 6 weeks of the season to get himself in tune and ready for October, as the Dodgers lose in Milwaukee yesterday. Now they'll conclude their series today before they go to St. Louis. And boy, have the Cardinals fallen flat on their face. But for the Dodgers right now, you wonder, with Betts coming back, another guy slowly but surely starting to come back. We would think Yamamoto will be somewhere down the road. You would think somewhere at the beginning of September, maybe toward the middle, so he could get a few starts under his belt to get himself ready for October. And when we look at this team as stacked as they are with the Jack Flahertys of the world and even Michael Kopechs, and this is a team that, as we talked about in spring training, and granted they've had a lot of injuries this year, Max Muncy, another one, we all know it's World Series win. As I kidded back in the latter part of March, it's World Series sweep or bust, because with the way this team has been constructed, you would think that they were going to be indestructible. And obviously we've seen a lot of things slip through the cracks here, granted with injuries, and I understand it's a built-in excuse, but now as they start to get themselves whole, and especially getting Betts back is enormous, let's see where the Dodgers go, even with the Padres and Diamondbacks nipping at the heels. The Padres swept the Pirates and pretty much concluded their season. As I mentioned earlier, they've lost 10 in a row. And the Diamondbacks, they're another team. You kind of wonder how this is going to really unfold between those two teams, because they may face one another in the opening round of the wild card, because they're both 4-5 tied, although the Diamondbacks have the upper hand there. So if the season ended today, the Diamondbacks would host the Padres in the first round of the playoffs. But how I look at it is that with the Diamondbacks playing, and I believe they haven't lost a series since the middle of June, and the Padres, we know what they've done here over the last 6 weeks or so. But for the Diamondbacks to sweep the Rockies and the Pirates, the same there with the Padres, as I mentioned, they're going into a scenario where the Diamondbacks now go to Tampa, and I'll get to the schedule a little bit later, but do they have an outside shot to win a division there with the Dodgers, even though on the come up to becoming a complete team, but do the Diamondbacks and Padres have a shot? I would say yes, but do I think they're going to win a division like I mentioned on Monday? I'm going to say no, because they're going to cool off at some point here. They're not going to continue to win series like they've done over the last 2 months. The Padres, I believe they're what? Off the top of my head, throughout this stretch, I want to say they're like 23-5. And yes, it would be a shame if they could continue this torrid pace, both teams, only to face off in the wild card round where one of those teams is going to have to go home. So, got to keep that in mind. I get you still have 6 more weeks left in the season, but that's how torrid these two teams have played here. But we would think they will certainly cool down at some point. That's why I think the Dodgers will win the division when it's all said and done. So that's what we have there. Now let me go through the divisions real quick. We know about Yankees-Orioles. Yankees have a half-game lead as of right now. Day off today, and the Orioles, I believe they'll conclude their series against as a matter of fact, they'll start a series with the Red Sox today, and I believe that's a 4-gamer at home. So let's see if the Orioles could get a victory today so they can tie again with the Yankees. And remember, they have the season series advantage as of right this moment. So, and they do have 3 games in the next to last series of the year at Yankee Stadium, and those 3 games are going to be enormous to see who comes out with the division crown. Then you have the Guardians, who, strange as their last couple of weeks have been, remember, they had lost 7 in a row, including the first 2 to the Twins last Friday before winning the back 2 games of that series. And then now the Guardians have put themselves in good stead to where they have a 5-game winning streak. And after polishing off the Cubs at home here in the early part of the week, and with the Twins, who won the first 2 games against Kansas City, which was a big test for the Royals, and although they failed because they left out of the Twin Cities trailing a game behind going into that series, but they did salvage the series yesterday, which was big for them, because if they got swept, that would have put more distance between them and the Twins for the final wild card spot. So kudos to the Royals for hanging in there, but the Twins did what they had to do. They won 2 out of 3, although they would like to have at least another one of those games against the Guardians over the past weekend. But they do have a 4-game advantage, the Guardians, over the Twins in the division. We would think they'll be fine when it's all said and done as far as capturing a division title. And as it is right now, Cleveland 72-49. Think about this, they have the best record in baseball. The Guardians. Do you really trust them 100% to go far in October? I don't. I hate to say it. I hope they do. That franchise has not won a World Series since 1948, and if there's any team in baseball that needs to win this year, I would certainly root for them. But 72-49, Yankees are 72-50, Orioles are 71-50, so they have a game in hand there. And with the separation, all those 3 teams separated by 1 game, where Guardians half game ahead of the Yankees, and then a game over the Orioles, where the Orioles obviously are half game behind the Yanks for the best record in the American League. So that's one to keep an eye on. And the Astros are 65-55. So if you do the math, they are 6 games behind the Guardians and 5 behind the Yankees and Orioles. So that's going to be not insurmountable, but as we get deeper, that lead could shrink, but at the same time could separate. So I would think the Astros could be entrenched in the 3 spot. But let's see where we are Labor Day as far as how close the Astros get to those top teams in the AL. I'll get to the wild card in a second. Phillies, they've been just terrible. What is it? They did win last night. They beat the Marlins. They got shut out at home for the first time in forever. And they'll conclude their series today with the Marlins. But the Braves, who have played a little bit better here. Now, granted, they did lose 2 out of 3 to the Rockies, but they have won the first 3 games against the Giants, and now the Giants look like they're going to be gasping for water, as I'll get to the wild card, like I mentioned shortly. But the Braves now have beaten the Giants 3 straight, and that's a big series because they've not only have gotten some separation from the Giants, but the Giants can't inch any closer, considering that the Braves have done what they've had to do over the first 3 games out in the Bay Area. So 6-game lead in the division. I understand that's pretty lengthy, but Braves and Phillies, I believe they have one more matchup later on this season. We'll keep a close eye on that. Mets right now are 8 games back, and not that they were going to be any threat, but because of the Philly demise as of late. They've inched closer to the point where maybe we thought there could have been an outside shot for both of those teams, Braves and Mets, to get closer. But as it is right now, I'm sure that the Phillies will cruise to a division title. Brewers, now you can pretty much say that they're the one team in baseball, as crazy as this is going to sound, could put their feet up and rest, because they will be in a rocking chair from now until the first week of October. They have a 9-game lead in the division, 8.5 ahead of the Cardinals. Cardinals have just been awful here. They got swept by the Reds, who now the Reds may have propelled themselves back into the wild card mix. Yes, we'll touch on that. But the Cardinals have hit the skids here, and not a good time to do so. Who knows if they're going to be heard from again? We would think they will because of the way the wild card in the National League has gone. But there has been some separation there, which of course I'll get to. But the Brewers, to me, they're set. They're the one team that's an automatic lock to win a division in baseball. Who would have said that about 3-4 weeks ago? And then, like I mentioned, Dodgers, 3-0 loss over the Diamondbacks and Padres. 2.5 overall, so they are close, but let's see what the Dodgers do. And remember, the Dodgers go to St. Louis after their final game in Milwaukee. So if the Cardinals continue to flail here, and I believe the Cardinals do have a day off today, so maybe they'll regroup, and let me just double check that. But if they do have a day off, yes they do, they'll regroup, and who knows, maybe that will be the cure-all for them, as the Dodgers will head to the Gateway City. So that's what you have in the divisions. As far as the wild cards go, there is some separation. And it makes you wonder whether or not we're going to have a juicy wild card race, which we probably thought as early as 2 weeks ago, especially in the National League, where you had about 8 teams battling for 2 spots. Now that is not the case. And I'll start with the NL. We know Diamondbacks and Padres, they have 3-0 loss, but a 4-game lead over the Braves right now. And then the Braves have a 2-game lead over the Mets. After that, a little precipitous. The Giants, 4-0 loss behind the Mets. Now, let me add this up here. Now, the Mets have 3 games in hand over the Giants and a game in hand, Reds and Cardinals. I'm just going to throw them in the mix right now. So, they are certainly behind the 8 ball, the Giants, as of right this moment, because although they're 2.5 back of the Mets, and that's not what matters, even though they do have to leapfrog them, but they are 4-0 loss. So they are right now in a perilous spot to where they could really fall out of this playoff race, even though they are tied with the Reds and Cardinals, 4.5 back. And the Reds and Cards have 2 games in hand on the Giants. So the Reds, with their sweep over the Cardinals, have put themselves in a position to where they could be part of this discussion. But I think, let me see them get a couple of games over 500. They're 1 game under right now. Same for the Cardinals, for that matter. And maybe we could discuss that. But right now, it looks like it's going to be Mets, Braves, to see who's going to get that last spot. And I hate to be a downer on this. We know historically Braves-Mets matchups and how that has fared over the years. Regular season and even postseason. And I know postseason was the one time in 99 where the Mets were down 0-3 in the series. They won those 2 games to get themselves back to Atlanta. They were down 5-0. They tied the game, and we all know Kenny Rogers, the walk-off, bringing up bad memories of that. That's actually 25 years ago this coming October. But if it's going to be Braves and Mets down the stretch, we understand that that may not bode well for the Amazings. And they'll conclude their series against the A's at Citi Field. And I hope Austin Adams gets another shot at the Mets, because although he didn't want to offend the Mets because of his antics there with the "oh my gosh," mimicking the Jose Iglesias song, he even apologized and said that Iglesias was a good dude because Adams got cut there early in the season. But for him and his histrionics after a strikeout there on Tuesday night, let's see if the Mets can polish off the A's before the Marlins come to town, because they're going to need to win these games. And we'll get into the schedule in a moment, but that is your wild card scenario where in the National League, where it looked like it was going to be, as I like to say, a battle royale to the end. Right now, it's looking like a lot of these wrestlers have tapped out, and now you only got a couple of guys in the ring, and you may not have much as we get into September. And in the American League, it's Orioles right now as of this second. They have a 3.5 game lead over the Twins, 5 over the Royals. And right now the Royals have a 2 game lead over the Red Sox, although the Red Sox are 1-0 loss, so that you have to consider. And the Red Sox have 2 games in hand over the Royals, so that counts big time. But then you have the Mariners, 3 back, and then Tampa, right now they're 2 games under, and after getting swept by the Astros, who knows if they're going to be heard from again. But 5.5, 2 under 500, forget about anybody else after that. And the Texas Rangers, they're kaput also. Forget about wild card. But we thought maybe for division, considering that they were just a handful of games behind Seattle and the Astros at one point, even though they were maybe about 5.5 back, but they were 4 in the loss, and you thought, all right, well, I guess we're going to have to consider them. Considering, not the case, as they're currently 9.5 games back in the West, and they are just toast and pretty much done for any playoff possibilities. So that's what you have with baseball. Let me get to the schedule for the weekend to see what we got cooking. You have a few games today, a lot of wrap-up series. Boston and Baltimore, obviously, is the start of a 4-gamer. Washington and Philadelphia, that's also a 4-gamer as well. Twins go to Texas, so maybe they could fatten up there with the pitching staff there on the Rangers hurting with no Eovaldi and with Max Scherzer as well. Then you have Seattle, Detroit, as we talked about closing out their series. But the series that will start tomorrow and into the weekend, Kansas City at Cincinnati. I'm bringing up Cincinnati only because of what they've done here as of late, but I don't know. Are they going to be a threat? Absolutely not, but I got to bring them up anyway. Yanks are in Detroit, Seattle at Pittsburgh, like I mentioned, Arizona at Tampa. You also have Cleveland at Milwaukee, battle of the top division-leading Central teams in the AL and NL, so that's maybe not the sexiest matchup, but a very good one nevertheless. Then you have Atlanta going to play the Angels, San Diego at Colorado, so they'll probably get 2 out of 3 minimum, maybe a sweep, considering that the Diamondbacks did the same to the Rockies. So that's what we have with baseball. Couple of interesting series, but as we get through these dog days, that's what we have cooking. Let's see how it's all going to shake down here over the course of these next 3 days heading into the early part of next week. Now let me turn my attention as I put on the helmet and shoulder pads to get to some NFL news and notes. And yes, can we please, I beg you, football gods, Brandon Aiyuk. We've been talking about this now, I think, at least over the last couple of podcasts. Now, the latest is that the Niners want to keep Brandon Aiyuk. But there is actually a trade in place where the Steelers, I guess, they're already ready to not only make the trade, but also sign off and fill out whatever Brandon Aiyuk wants on the checkbook, which is going to be minimum $100 million. And this is the Pittsburgh Steelers? Wait, they do not give out these big-time contracts other than the quarterback when Ben Roethlisberger was there. And yes, they have given out big contracts, more team-friendly because of how the Steelers operate. But now there is a trade in place that if, for whatever reason, nothing gets ironed out between the Niners and Aiyuk, that they're going to ship him to Pittsburgh. And who knows what Pittsburgh's going to send back. So that's also another thing you have to consider, and that's been under wraps here. But here's my question. If you're John Lynch, the GM of the team, and you've stated that you want Aiyuk as part of your team, then why are you even thinking that there's a trade in place? Yes, you could talk about a backup plan. Yes, you could talk about, well, here's plan B if he's not going to sign. No, if you want him and there are parameters of a trade that is on deck to send him to Pittsburgh, then which one are we talking about here? Because how I would look at it, if I'm the GM of the team, is to say, yes, we do want Brandon Aiyuk to be a part of the 2024 49er team. That's it. No, well, there's a trade in place just in case. GMs don't say that. And maybe they're doing that to cover their own ass because the fan base may be in uproar. Because if they do ship him to Pittsburgh, they could say, well, we do want him, but there is a trade in place to kind of use that as a safety net for the front office to tell the fan base that, hey, we tried. I understand that that's very risky. I understand that that's even almost unheard of. It's almost similar to what Brian Cashman did, the Yankee GM, when they couldn't come to an agreement with Aaron Judge in his walk year, to where they said, well, we offered 7 years for $210 million, and even Judge was surprised by the Yankees announcing that. But the only reason why they did that is because, again, they're covering their own rear ends. Because they don't want the fan base to be in outrage to say, well, wait a minute. You didn't make an offer. You didn't even do anything to keep this guy. And, of course, what did he do that year? He had 62 home runs, and he got his $360 million deal over 9 years. And I'm not trying to compare Brandon Aiyuk's situation to Aaron Judge, but because of the way the front office has acted here, how could you not think, as an outsider trying to look in, that this is what the Niners are doing to kind of save face here? But to me, if you want the guy, he already would have been signed. And based on a report that I read, he was on the practice field yesterday. So you have to wonder or even think that he's going to be a part of this team, because why is he practicing? He had the red shirt on, the cutoff there, and I don't know how much he participated, but if he's in camp and he's on the practice field, chances are he's not going anywhere. But can we end it? Can we just please put the lid on it, say we've extended him 4 years, 110, we gave him $80 million guaranteed. That's it. We could all now sleep peacefully, move on, don't have to worry about this. And once again, Aiyuk, very good player. No knock on him and his talent. But this isn't the Emmitt Smith scenario of 1993 where he held out until the team was 0-2 and then they re-signed him. And then what did he do? He had an MVP year and they won a Super Bowl. This is not the Emmitt Smith 2.0 or anything close to that. But can we put an end to this, please? John Lynch, this isn't on Kyle Shanahan, but I'm going to also say him too. I just had enough of this. And of course, me being a Steelers fan, not that I'm on edge or losing sleep by any stretch, but again, this has gone on way much longer than it should. And I understand you have all these other scenarios with CeeDee Lamb and even Haason Reddick, who I'm going to get to next. I mean, enough. Can we just finalize this and move on, please? Thank you. Now let's talk about Haason Reddick. The pass rusher, formerly of the Eagles, was traded to the Jets for, I believe, a third-round pick there. And even though he's in the last year of a deal, but he even mentioned to the Jet brass that he was going to show up at training camp, even though he's in the final year of a contract, and that hopefully they would hammer out a deal as the training camp commenced and you get into the preseason, etc. And then what we heard earlier this week is that he's requesting a trade. Now, this is a bad optic on Reddick no matter how you slice it. You can't say that you're going to show up at Jet camp knowing that you want to show and prove to a new team. Yes, you want a new contract. Yes, he's had a couple of big years in Philadelphia to lead into this upcoming season. But you can't say you're going to show up, either he or his representation, and then hold out to be fined every day on top of that, and then to think, all right, now I want to trade. I mean, who are we kidding here? Now, can the Jets survive without Reddick? I think they can, but as we all know, pass rushers do not grow on trees. Pass rushers are a premium in the sport. And I'm not trying to make Haason Reddick out to be Reggie White, but he is still a game-wrecking force that could certainly turn the fortunes of a game at any moment. So for the Jets to not get him in camp and get him signed, and even Aaron Rodgers said, come on, it's going to be a fun ride. He wants him, obviously, in Florham Park there in New Jersey, where the facility and their practice facility is. But enough. Reddick, I'm not going to say this is what you got to do based on what it is I have to say, but if you told the front office that I'm going to be there, and granted, yes, you're a little disgruntled, and yes, I deserve a lot more, and everybody else getting paid, the Chris Jones of the world, and look at what the receivers are getting, and so on and so forth, i.e. minus the aforementioned Brandon Aiyuk and CeeDee Lamb, who I'll get to in a second. But come on. One more time, enough. You're already halfway through training camp. The second preseason game is the schedule's about to kick off tomorrow. And not that it's all about the preseason games, because generally these guys sit, but you want to get acclimated. You want to get accustomed to your surroundings. You want to try to get to a point where you are not Michael Strahan, who's played 15 years in the league, held out throughout all that training camp in 2007, and then showed up there pretty much at the start of the season. And then we understand what happened from that point on. They won a Super Bowl, and Strahan went off to the sunset and became a Hall of Famer right after that. So let's see what's going to happen with that Reddick soap opera as that unfolds. And then you have CeeDee Lamb. We talked about this on Monday with Jerry Jones, and we get it. As long as Jones is the GM, owner, concession stand, the manager, the accountant, the head of security, everything, all the hats that he wears, this is going to be a disaster. But I would think Lamb is going to be there right before week 1 where they play the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. So we have that. And then we also had a trade just yesterday with Matthew Judon, another guy who, for whatever reason, got his feathers ruffled when he showed up at camp and had a spat with the head coach, the rookie head coach, Gerard Mayo. to where he didn't even practice, he didn't even suit up, he didn't even do any of that, and stood away to the point where they traded him to Atlanta for a third-round pick. Good pickup for Atlanta, brings a pass rusher there. A lot of expectations there with Kirk Cousins and an offense that has a lot of good pieces. So for the Falcons, I'm sure they're expecting big things there this year, winning a division, maybe making some hay and waves in the playoffs in an NFC that, other than San Francisco, Philadelphia, Detroit, I'm going to say Philly just based on respect, and maybe Dallas. Hey, who knows? They'll throw their hat in the ring and see where the chips will fall come January. But I think that bringing in Judon will be a big help, and I'm sure they're going to have to sign him on a dotted line at some point, whether they say, we'll take care of you in the offseason. That remains to be seen, but he's also going into a walk year, so you would think that they're going to sign him to a handsome deal as he makes his way down to the ATL. So we'll keep that in mind as we move it along. And then J.J. McCarthy, the first-round pick of the Minnesota Vikings, a lot of people thought that he would be the guy, maybe not starting under center. That would be Sam Darnold for the Vikings week 1, as they'll play the Giants there at MetLife. But tore his meniscus, needs surgery, done for the year. That's just a tough break for a Viking team, wondering if they had their quarterback and a guy that probably would have filled in or would have taken place of Darnold as you got into maybe week 4 or 5, etc. Because Darnold, as we all know, is a stopgap. His career, a lot of people thought coming out of USC, he was going to have a big-time career, and obviously that has not been the case. This is his 4th team now in the last, 5 years? Jets, Carolina, San Francisco, and now here with the Vikings. So McCarthy, not going to see the field this year. You're going to have to wait another year before you get a chance to see the Michigan quarterback, see if he could make his stance and make his stock as a number 1 pick stick here in the NFL. That's what I have there. As far as the high tops, as I lace them up to get to the NBA, not much to discuss here, but I do have to bring up this situation regarding the schedule. So for the association, the schedule will be released later today. And we'll get to look at the Christmas Day matchups. And yes, I understand the NFL is going to overshadow that, but we all look at the games opening night. We know the Celtics will have their ring ceremony and banner 18 raised to the rafters. Chances are, if I had to take a guess who they're going to play, I would think it'll probably be the Sixers, maybe even Milwaukee, probably one of the top teams, maybe even the Knicks for that matter. That would be an interesting opening night matchup for everybody to see. The Knicks with obviously Mikal Bridges and all the anticipation that the Knicks fan will be ready and geeked up for with the Celtic team that obviously everybody's going to be gunning for in the East. And then you're going to have your nightcap, which I'm sure it's going to be Lakers or Nuggets or some combination, maybe even Nuggets, Lakers again. We'll have to wait and see. But why, in the NBA suits' crazy mind, did they even think to release part of the schedule where the start of the NBA In-Season Cup Challenge was going to be interesting to the diehard sports fan or even the big-time NBA fan? Why? Oh, because on November 12th, Klay Thompson is going to make his first appearance as a member of the opposition, as we all know, signed with the Dallas Mavericks. His first game back at the Chase Center in San Francisco against his former mates is going to be that game because of the way the groups are made up for the cup schedule to commence. So I guess from November 12th to December, whatever it is, 8th, 9th, 10th, whatever that NBA Cup will be. So they thought to say, hey, let's put this out here so we can tell everybody where Klay Thompson is, when he's going to return as a member of the Mavericks to play against his former mates. Now, I don't think that that was the motive, if you ask me, but maybe that was the theme to kind of put out the storyline as, hey, here's the cup schedule, but part of that is Klay Thompson's return. That is weak sauce, if you ask me. And again, I'm not trying to say that that's what the NBA has done, but I'm sure they dangled that little carrot to say, well, here's the cup schedule, people, and to highlight that, boom, Klay Thompson. Nobody cares about this in-season tournament. Ask LeBron, coming off winning a gold medal, if he has, I don't even know if they have rings for that. If they do, that's a flat-out embarrassment. But ask him about that NBA Cup championship. Does he really care about that? Maybe who knows? Maybe he'll even say that because we're the first team to do it, it's special. Nonsense. Nobody cares about this. I don't care about it. I'm sure a dyed in the wool, as much as they even want to pump it up and break out the pom-poms for it, and maybe they can look at, who's playing who over the course of that month. Come on, seriously? I understand it's a thing where they want to try to generate buzz and interest, especially when you're in the middle of an NFL season, but does anybody really care? That banner that they raised, and I'm sure, I hate to say it like this, but Kobe, Wilt, Jerry West, they are spinning in their graves over that. And West he was alive to even see that. So I'm sure he probably looked at that. It's like, wait, we're the Lakers. We're raising an NBA Cup banner? What? I don't know why the league does that. If they're going to release the schedule, have the Christmas Day games, your opening night games, and then you want to maybe highlight certain matchups throughout the course of the season. And then, by the way, here's your in-season cup schedule. But to bring that out yesterday on the eve of when the schedule is going to be released, that is a no for me, dog. But that's what I got with the NBA. Nothing else to really get into there. Same for the National Hockey League and any of the other sports. Nothing much to really unpack unless you're into UFC 305 Saturday night, which will really be Sunday afternoon in New Zealand. In Australia, not New Zealand, where the event will take place, the big middleweight matchup between Israel Adesanya and Dricus DuPlessis. Now, guess what, people? I actually dug into this a little bit because I know about Adesanya, and we've talked about him in the past on this podcast. But for DuPlessis, I want to get a little bit of the temperature to kind of see what this fight could entail. And it's a Sunday afternoon. It may rain Sunday, so who knows? Maybe I'll watch it. Well, Sunday afternoon in Australia. It's going to be Saturday night late here on the East Coast, so chances are I'll take a peek at it. But a lot of the information that I've been able to gather, even from actual fighters, they say that this is going to be Adesanya's fight, although DuPlessis, he has a good shot to win. And they talked about if he comes out strong and obviously has Adesanya backpedaling, it could be a scenario where maybe a lot of momentum with DuPlessis could be a thing where he can upstage Adesanya over the course of 5 rounds. Obviously, they know a lot better than I do, but a lot of people think that Adesanya will win this fight and obviously be the middleweight champ. As a matter of fact, I should have looked this up even further, people, so it's a bad job on my part. Adesanya right now is a guy that obviously is very reputable. And I'm going to even type this up right now as I speak, people. So I apologize at the moment. But I think Adesanya is a guy that will probably, when it's all said and done, and no, DuPlessis is the guy who's actually the champion. And although Adesanya could be the favorite and a guy that may steal the title away, I don't know much about DuPlessis. I know a little bit more about Adesanya, but that's not saying much. But I will definitely take a good look at this fight come Saturday night, and I'll be able to see from my vantage point how DuPlessis or even Adesanya, how they're going to match up against one another based on what it is that I've read and watched here. And the little that I know about Adesanya, I'm going to say him. And again, people, not saying much, but I'm looking forward to watching this, seeing how this is all going to unfold, and then have a good bird's eye view and a better assessment of how this fight will take place there down in Australia. And I know there was even some words knocking Adesanya about him being Nigerian and trying to be an Australian or trying to even blend in, where DuPlessis had made some comments, I believe, and therefore that's going to sting Adesanya, and he's going to take that into the fight. That was another thing that I also saw on one of the video clips from one of the other fighters. So yeah, we'll see. I'm sure it's going to be a battle to the end. Hopefully it's an entertaining fight. And again, come Monday, I'll be able to dissect it and put a nice pretty bow on it. And hopefully it is a good fight and it's entertaining and maybe not a quick tap out or a quick knockout for UFC 305 there come Saturday night, Sunday morning, or afternoon down under. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books, as always. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, and review people on all available platforms, Apple, Spotify, as well as video on Spotify, as you all know. And the website is jreels.com. The YouTube page at jreels, putting up daily content. And I understand, even with the slow sports period, you know I'll find angles, I'll find stuff to discuss as we get toward the end of the month. And once September rolls around, you know I'm going to be bursting at the seams with a lot more content there. Also some vlogs that I'm working on that I hope to have up by the weekend. So stay tuned on my social media platforms, especially Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, which I'll get to in a second. But please, subscribe, people. Rate, review, throw me a few stars. Go to my YouTube channel, subscribe there. I just eclipsed the 400 subscriber mark. I'm trying to get to 1,000 so I can cut the top of my head. It's been over 6 months, or right at 6 months. 6 months tomorrow will be the last time I cut the top of my hair. So come on, people. Let's go. Let's get cracking. I'd appreciate all your support. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion, you could do so at the following, as well as follow any of my day-to-day social media stuff when it comes to the podcast and beyond, the channel, etc. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the J-Reels Podcast. Twitter, X, J-Reels1, just a number. Also, the old-fashioned way, the J-Reels Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA since day one, since birth, 55 plus years ago, as I continue to deliver nothing but fire, passion, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the J-Reels Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the J-Reels Podcast, on the flip, baby.